I've always considered myself a logical individual, someone who thrives on reason and numerical data, navigating the dependable realm of programming and technology. My career in IT has shaped my perspective, allowing me to view everything through a binary framework, either true or false, on or off. This clarity brought me comfort as I believed every problem, no matter how intricate, had a solution. However, it's intriguing how swiftly that sense of assurance can fade, and how the distinction between reality and the unknown can become hazy when confronted with the unexplainable. I used to chuckle at ghost tales, brushing them off as mere fabrications of vivid imaginations. But then, the letters began to arrive. I reside in a company-provided house, a large, somewhat dreary structure that prioritizes functionality over warmth. I share this space with 4 co-workers from the same IT team. Our days are spent in the sterile confines of our office, enveloped by the steady buzz of computers and the rhythmic tapping of keyboards. Although the job is demanding, we excel at it and generally find satisfaction in our work. We often joked that our living situation resembled a scene from a horror film, 5 individuals squeezed into an ancient, creaky house, likely built long before any of us existed. However, the laughter faded after Alvin passed away. Alvin was more than just a co-worker. He was a true friend to all of us. We had shared many years together since our first days at the company, and he was always the one to brighten our spirits with his infectious smile and playful jokes. However, a few months before his tragic passing, we noticed a shift in his demeanor. He became increasingly isolated and secretive, withdrawing from our after-work gatherings and late-night gaming marathons. While we all recognized the change, life's demands kept us from probing deeper into his struggles. Then, one fateful night, he was gone. The news of his suicide left us in shock, as there were no signs, no farewell note, just the harsh reality of his absence. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere in our home shifted dramatically. We attempted to maintain our usual routines, but an unshakable tension lingered in the air, making the house feel heavier and more somber. Strange occurrences began to unfold. Echoes of footsteps in vacant rooms and doors mysteriously creaking open and shut. We tried to dismiss these eerie happenings as mere quirks of an old house, yet deep down, we all felt a sense of unease that we couldn't ignore. About a month after Alvin passed away, I received the first letter. It came in a simple white envelope, lacking a return address, with just my name hastily written on the front, in a handwriting that felt oddly familiar yet elusive. I opened it, anticipating a routine message, perhaps a bill or a work-related notice. Instead, what I found sent a chill through me. The letter was penned in a trembling script, the words bursting with urgency. It began with a greeting that sent a shudder down my spine. "Hello, my friend. It's been a while." The handwriting was unmistakably Alvin's. I stared at the letter, my thoughts racing. Surely this was some cruel prank. However, as I continued reading, my skepticism morphed into a deeper sense of dread. The letter was a chaotic jumble of thoughts, filled with cryptic warnings and unsettling ideas. Alvin described a feeling of being watched, of something lurking in the corners of the house. He mentioned hearing whispers in the stillness of the night, and a presence that seemed to shadow him constantly. He recounted nightmares of being trapped in a dark, suffocating space with no escape. Yet the most haunting part was the abrupt ending, where Alvin seemed to stop mid-thought, as if interrupted. The final words were scrawled in that shaky hand. "It's coming for you too." I was at a loss with what to do about the letter. A part of me felt compelled to share it with my housemates, while another part, overwhelmed with fear, wanted to destroy it and act as if it had never been written. Ultimately, I decided to hide it away in the back of a drawer, hoping to erase it from my mind. Yet the haunting words lingered, and I began to perceive unsettling things around the house that I had previously overlooked. There was an unsettling presence that I couldn't quite identify. It went beyond the usual creaks of the floorboards or the chilly drafts from the windows. It felt as if something was burrowing beneath my skin. Nightmares plagued my sleep, filled with vivid images of being pursued by an unseen force. I would wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing, convinced that something sinister lurked in my room. My housemates sensed the change too, though we all hesitated to voice our fears. As the days passed, the atmosphere in the house became increasingly tense, and we began to isolate ourselves, retreating into our own separate realities. The letters kept arriving, each one more unsettling than the previous. They greeted me at home after work, either neatly arranged on my desk or hidden beneath my pillow. Although they were penned in Alvin's familiar handwriting, the messages grew increasingly bizarre and disjointed. They spoke of nonsensical things, rooms that defied logic, doors that led to nowhere, and reflections in mirrors that weren't his own. He urged me to be cautious and to pay attention to the signs, warning that whatever had taken him was now after me. I attempted to dismiss it, convincing myself it was merely an elaborate joke. Yet, deep down, I sensed the truth. Something had been in the house with us all along, lurking in the shadows, biding its time to pounce. I began to feel as if I were losing my grip on reality. Concentration at work became impossible, and sleep eluded me at night. I was perpetually on high alert, flinching at every sound and every flicker of movement in my peripheral vision. It didn't take long for my housemates to realize that something was off with me. They reached out, asking if I was all right and if there was anything they could do to assist. Yet, I found myself unable to share the truth. How could I possibly explain? They would think I had lost my mind, and honestly, I was beginning to wonder if I had. The letters kept arriving, each one more urgent and pleading than the last. Alvin, or whoever was impersonating him, was trying to send me a warning, but I felt completely lost on how to respond. Then, one evening, everything changed. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling and wishing for sleep, I heard a sound. It started off as a faint scratching, almost like something was being dragged across the floor. I attempted to brush it off, convincing myself it was merely the house settling, but the noise grew louder and more demanding. My heart raced as I sat up and listened intently. The sound was definitely coming from downstairs. I quietly slipped out of bed, trying to make as little noise as possible, and headed towards the door. The house was enveloped in darkness, with only the faint light from the street lamp outside illuminating my path. As I opened the door and stepped into the hallway, I strained my ears to pinpoint the source of the unsettling noise. It was definitely coming from the living room. I cautiously descended the stairs, each step creaking ominously on the aged wood. The sound intensified as I approached, a rhythmic scraping that made my skin crawl. Reaching the bottom of the stairs, I peeked around the corner into the living room, which appeared empty, yet the noise was more pronounced, emanating from the area near the fireplace. I entered the room, my heart racing, and noticed the fireplace was dark and cold, but something unusual lay on the hearth. An unexpected stack of letters, all addressed to me in that unmistakable handwriting. My hands trembled as I picked up the top letter and tore it open, revealing a brief message written in Alvin's familiar scrawl. "It's in the house." I let the letter slip from my fingers, my thoughts racing wildly. As I began to walk away, something caught my attention in my peripheral vision. There, in the doorway, stood a figure cloaked in shadows. Initially, I assumed it was one of my housemates, but as it stepped into the light, a wave of terror washed over me. It was Alvin, or at least it resembled him. The figure was unnaturally tall and gaunt, its skin an eerie, translucent white, as if all vitality had been stripped away. Its eyes were mere voids, dark and hollow, drawing in the surrounding light. A grotesque smile spread across its face, a twisted expression that sent a shiver through my entire being. Then, in a voice that was a chilling whisper, it uttered, "I've been waiting for you." I felt an overwhelming urge to run, to scream, to escape the paralyzing fear that held me in place. Yet, my body refused to obey, leaving me stuck, ensnared by the chilling stare of those vacant eyes. The figure advanced slowly, each movement measured and purposeful, as if it had an eternity to close the distance. When it extended a hand toward me, a frigid, clammy sensation enveloped my arm, causing me to flinch and finally break free from my frozen state. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. The figure's grin grew wider, and its voice resonated in my mind, whispering ominously, "It's already inside you." Those words struck me like a bell tolling, sending a shiver through my veins. My thoughts raced in a desperate attempt to comprehend the surreal scene before me, but nothing made sense. There was no rational explanation for this. It couldn't be true. Alvin was gone. Yet the entity standing in front of me, wearing his likeness, felt disturbingly tangible. I stumbled back, trying to create some space between myself and the ghostly figure. My back collided with the wall, and I could feel the coarse wallpaper pressing against my skin. In a panic, I reached for the light switch, desperate to illuminate the room and dispel the encroaching shadows. My fingers finally located the switch, and I flipped it on. The room erupted with brightness, and just like that, the figure had disappeared. For a brief moment, I remained frozen, breathless, my heart racing wildly, the only sound being the harshness of my own breaths. The letters I had dropped were still scattered across the floor, but the figure, Alvin, whatever it had been, was nowhere to be found. I made a conscious effort to breathe slowly and deeply, attempting to soothe my racing heart. My rational mind fought to regain control, insisting that what I had just witnessed was merely a figment of my imagination, a product of stress, sorrow, and sleepless nights. Yet, despite my attempts to convince myself otherwise, a nagging certainty lingered within me. What I had seen was undeniably real, and it was still present, hidden somewhere in the house. The urgency to escape surged through me like a sudden shock, propelling me into action. I had to leave, to distance myself from whatever was lurking in the dark corners. I turned and dashed for the stairs, my feet thundering against the creaky wood as I hurried to my room. Bursting through the door, I snatched my phone from the bedside table, my hands trembling so violently that I struggled to grip it. I dialed the first name that popped into my head, Ryan, my housemate and closest friend. The phone rang once, then twice before it went to voicemail. Frustrated, I hung up and tried again, but there was no response. I called the others in succession, but none answered. Panic tightened around my throat. Where could they be? Were they still in the house? Were they even safe? I walked back and forth in the room, gripping my phone tightly as I tried to decide my next move. Calling the police crossed my mind, but what could I possibly say? That I had seen a ghost? They would surely think I was out of my mind. Honestly, I was beginning to wonder if I was losing it myself. Yet I knew I couldn't remain here after what I had witnessed. I needed to leave. I quickly put on my jacket and shoved my phone into my pocket. Just as I was about to reach the door, I heard it. The sound of heavy, purposeful footsteps approaching from the stairs. I froze, every part of me urging to flee, but my legs felt like lead. The footsteps grew louder and closer, finally stopping right outside my door. For what felt like an eternity, there was nothing but silence. Then, with a slow, ominous motion, the doorknob began to turn. I instinctively backed away, my gaze fixed on the door, my breath quickening in panic. The door creaked open gradually, revealing only the empty hallway beyond. I stood there, heart racing, waiting for something to happen, but the hallway remained still and vacant. I cautiously moved forward, my gaze sweeping through the dimness, searching for any hint of movement. The house was eerily quiet, the atmosphere thick with a tension that made each breath feel laborious. With each careful step, I found myself at the threshold, peering into the dark expanse of the hallway. I couldn't quite explain what drove me to leave my room, but I stepped into the corridor where the air was noticeably cooler and the shadows seemed to loom larger, more suffocating. I advanced slowly, my feet making almost no noise on the creaky wooden floor, feeling as though I was walking into a carefully laid trap, yet I felt an irresistible urge to continue. When I reached the top of the stairs, I glanced down into the living room, which was still illuminated and empty, just as I had left it. However, something felt off. The letters I had hastily dropped in my moment of panic were nowhere to be found. I blinked in disbelief, my mind racing to comprehend the scene before me. Those letters had been scattered across the floor, But now the space was completely clear, as if they had vanished into thin air. A sudden sound shattered the stillness, a faint, nearly undetectable whisper emanating from somewhere behind me. I turned around cautiously, my heart racing, and what I saw sent chills down my spine. It was a mirror, one I had walked by countless times without a second glance, yet now it appeared transformed. The glass had turned a deep, shadowy black, and the figure looking back at me was not my own. It was Alvin, his vacant eyes locked onto mine, his mouth contorted into that same horrifying grin. The whispering intensified, overwhelming my mind and drowning out all rational thought. I attempted to move, to escape, but I found myself frozen in place, ensnared by that dreadful, unblinking stare. The mirror began to undulate, its surface warping like liquid, and then Alvin's reflection emerged from the glass, moving with a slow, deliberate grace as if stepping out of a living nightmare. I staggered backward, my legs finally responding, but it was already too late. The figure lunged at me, its icy, clammy hands tightening around my throat, robbing me of breath. I fought against its grip, but it felt like iron, unyielding and frigid. The stench of its breath was overwhelming, a foul odor that made me want to retch. Then, just as quickly as it had come, it vanished. The grip loosened, and I collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, my heart racing in my chest. I glanced up, half expecting to see the figure looming over me, but the hallway was deserted. The mirror had disappeared, leaving only a blank wall as if it had never existed. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, my thoughts swirling, struggling to comprehend the bizarre encounter. It was a riddle with no answer, and I felt ensnared in a nightmare with no escape. That's when I heard the laughter. It started softly, almost a whisper, but soon escalated, echoing through the hallway. I recognized the voice. It was Alvin's, yet something about it felt wrong, twisted, and sinister. I jumped to my feet, my thoughts racing wildly. I needed to escape, to flee from whatever presence lurked within this house. But as I turned to dash away, something caught my eye that froze me in place. At the end of the hallway stood one of my housemates, clutching a letter in his hand. The same plain white envelope that had been haunting me every night since Alvin's passing. He wore a smile, but it was anything but warm. It mirrored the twisted grin I had seen on Alvin's face. He stepped closer, extending the letter toward me, and in that moment, I recognized the truth in his gaze. Those letters hadn't come from Alvin. They were his doing. My mind spun as the pieces clicked into place. The letters, the whispers, the shadowy figure in the mirror. It was all orchestrated by him. He had been toying with my fears, pushing me toward the edge of insanity, and now he was ready to complete his sinister game. I stumbled backward, my heart racing, but there was no escape. The hallway loomed before me, dark and infinite, and I realized I was cornered. I could try to run, but I couldn't flee from the reality that I was never truly alone. The letters were merely the start. The true nightmare was still ahead. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more terrifying stories. And remember, sometimes the most horrifying monsters aren't the ones that chase you, but the ones that wait patiently for you to come to them.